Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Josef Schachter, founder of the Schachter Energy Report online at SchachterEnergyReport.ca. He's speaking to us from Calgary. Welcome back to the show, Josef.
Good to be with you again, Jim.
Josef, Hurricane Ida and other follow-up tropical storms have really hammered the petroleum production facilities in Louisiana and along the Gulf Coast. What's that done to oil prices and gasoline futures?
Well, what's happened is the about 1.7, 1.8 million barrels, 95% of the offshore U.S. Crude oil production was shut in. And so we were down at, if you remember, 2 weeks ago at 61.74 at the low for WTI. And because of Ida and question mark of, is OPEC going to increase the 400,000, which they announced yesterday that they would, we got up to over $70 at WTI. But the way I look at it is we went from 77 down to, 61.74. And markets don't just go one way down. There's backing and filling. So given you had a $15 decline in the price, or $15 decline in the price of crude oil, a rally back of $7-8 is normal. 50% to two-thirds reversal of the decline. And that's what we did to the high today. I think we're going to start backing off because in September, starting week 2, week 3 of data, we're going to start seeing the normal seasonal fall build in inventories, and everybody's been looking at negative numbers, negative commercial stock builds over the last number of months, and that's what's driven the price of crude oil from, the 40s, at the beginning of the year, all the way up to 76.90, which was the high in early July. And my guess is we'll break 60 sometime in late September, and how low we go in the fourth quarter will be determined by the economic activity. Is the Fed tightening and tapering as significantly? What's going on in China? Are they still tightening up the economy there? And if we see sufficient, production and weaker demand, then we could go materially below 60 in the fourth quarter of this year.
Was the driving season this summer more intense or used up more supplies than expected?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we saw commercial stocks go down is twofold. One, people stayed at home; they didn't fly. But interesting that that EIA data for last week for jet fuel consumption is now above where it was pre the pandemic. So if you look at the last week of August data this year versus the last week of August data of 2019, we saw a significant increase in the number. So we are beginning to see more people flying. In terms of overall demand, though, there's two parts to it. One, of course, is the consumption domestically, which people didn't want to travel as much, so they were using more. And the second is a lot of the oil that's been brought on in the States, we're up 1.8 million barrels from a year ago, so we're at 11.5 million barrels in the EIA report yesterday. But a big part of that increase is lighter crudes, which are not refined in the U.S. Refining business because they're focused on using cheaper heavy crudes and making more margin. So the light crudes have been exported, and we've seen a big increase in U.S. exports. Just looking at the numbers from Friday, from this last week, it was 3.04 million barrels, We're looking at 2.8, 2.9 a year before, so we're looking at a decent continued increase in exports, and most of that exports would be light crude and then products.
We keep seeing all these reports, let's end oil and gas exploration, but is this politically motivated? Because I noticed in that report they didn't say anything about Saudi Arabia decreasing their oil and gas exploration.
No, they and Russia and others are continuing to expand their production, because I think most people are saying that yes, we want to transition away from coal-fired electricity. We want to use more natural gas-fired. We're going to have more electric vehicles on the road. I think 2 million cars of the 80 this year that were consumed were electric vehicles. But the problem we have is you're not going to outside of the OECD countries and maybe China, you're really not going to see a big increase in EV use between now and the end of this decade in Africa, in South America, and Asia that doesn't have the charging stations, and even in the OECD countries, the U.S. and Canada and others, the number of charging stations that are going to be needed have not started to be built. So you have a problem where the materials that go into the batteries, lithium, nickel, copper, are in short supply and prices are high, and there's no new mines coming on, not in my backyard, the NIMBY problem. And plus the countries where you have it in the Congo or Peru, Chile, they want their employees, the workers there want to get higher wages, so you're pushing the price up, and you're not getting the approvals because of environmental issues, etc. And people don't realize how much inputs of fossil fuels, diesel, etc., that go into producing, lithium, nickel, and copper. And so, to me, the amount of inputs versus the assumption that this is a clean tech, there's a lot of bad tech, a lot of bad, consumption of fossil fuels from the point of view of the environmentalists to get there. So I'm in the camp that, natural gas is my favorite commodity because it's the transition fuel to until we get sufficient renewables that can take up a big slug of the demand. And the commodity that's doing well right now because of shortages and the country's just saying, look, we need electricity. Coal's doing very well, but the long term, I think coal is probably going to be losing much more market share and has already lost in the United States and Canada a lot of market share.
I just saw a report as well. If we want to go all electric, we're going to have to double our electrical grid. Where's all this power going to come from?
That's right. And then building the electrical grid, what are you going to build it from? Now, you can build a lot of solar and you can build a lot of wind. The problem is a lot of places don't allow you to do that because nobody wants the eyesore of it. And how much inputs, are needed, metals and other items to create the solar panels and the wind farms, and the cost of that, from an environmental footprint. So to me, these assumptions that clean tech are not really clean tech because the inputs aren't, and I don't think we're spending enough money to significantly lower the demand of conventional fossil fuels for at least another decade, maybe even 2 decades.
Did Alberta make a mistake to call their anti-oil propaganda office the war room? Because it sounds pretty messy when you call it war. Because we know, for example, one coal-fired power plant in Chicago pollutes as much or more than the entire Alberta oil sands.
Yeah, and the boogeyman and the bad boy right now during this election of ours is the oil sands, as you've seen our Prime Minister, swing his fist at and attack the industry, and he's now also made the banks a little unhappy with him with a surtax on them. It's unbelievable government spending that's the problem, not. It's not a revenue problem, it's an expense problem for the feds. But, the politics are the politics, and until the 20th and we have a resolution of who's, does he get a minority government or is it going to be minority conservative, we still don't know it. But his assumption that he was going to get a majority government, I think, is totally fallacious now, given the protests and given the concerns that are having on the road. Plus, some shooting themselves in the foot, by some of the candidates and some of the policies.
Did Trudeau shoot himself in the foot when he was asked about monetary policy, and he said, "I don't follow that"?
Well, number one, that's for people in the know that are in the economy and that are active in the business world. Hearing that is a sign that maybe he doesn't deserve the job. And then another time he spoke up and interfered in the politics of the independent Bank of Canada, and it was mentioned to him that he did jump into areas that the PM should never get involved in. The Bank of Canada, the Federal Reserve, are supposed to be apolitical.
Well, Bill Clinton had a simple policy. It's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
It worked for him, and of course he would be on the left side of the political spectrum.
Yeah, and the giveaways we've had to get people back to work and to support people during the pandemic, have been very useful, and companies admit that they would not have survived without it in many cases. But now that we're into September and the COVID is under control, people are used to wearing masks. We have a system that works that people are used to. Plus, most people can have had their second shot and maybe are getting ready for their third shot if they're one of the high risk groups. But the bottom line is we need to start focusing on the problems, and one of them is, of course, housing prices are out of line in many of the major urban markets, and unless the government frees up capital to build more, and we see a significant increase in new capacity of housing, housing is going to be out of line for many people who just don't have housing yet. And it's been a nice, fabulous win for those who own a home. You look at the paper, the Globe, and the weekends where they talk about housing prices across Canada. It's shocking to see how high prices are, even in Halifax and Winnipeg, compared to what your perception would be.
Gosh, I remember in the late 70s in Winnipeg, you could buy a decent 2-bedroom house for about $26,000.
And probably now $700,000-800,000.
Yeah, and a mansion for $60,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course, we all look at the prices in the 70s, and then I look at how little I was paid. It's all relative, isn't it?
Yeah. It's what is it? The cost versus your income. There was a number, but I think we're pushing record levels now for because incomes have not risen as fast as real estate has in the last 4 or 5 years. In the major markets, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver.
Sure, your pay raise is the official rate of inflation, which doesn't include housing or fuel prices or taxes.
Yeah.
We'll have more with Josef Schachter right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Josef Schachter. Joseph, Calgary, I call it the city of eternal optimism. Are they optimistic in the oil patch this year, or will they be?
Well, the optimism, of course, liquids prices are fabulous, and so companies are really happy with that, and the extra cash flow they're using, especially for debt-laden companies to pay down debt. The commodity that's really doing very well now is natural gas. There's a shortage in the States. Storage is not building sufficiently for the winter of 21-22. So natural gas prices are going to stay high, in the winter to come. They may back off after the air conditioning season backs off in the next couple of weeks as we get into slightly cooler temperatures. But I think the big win will be natural gas in the next couple of years because it is the transition fuel. And optimism is there, but also optimism is there because the industry is focused on trying to find ways to lower their emissions, be it CO2 emissions, methane emissions, whatever. And a whole new industry in Calgary for this leading-edge clean tech is creating a lot of jobs, and a lot of money has been raised for that. So there is some optimism. But when you go downtown, buildings are still very empty. Restaurants in the downtown core are not really doing very well. The patios are probably the best, seeing activity and customers. But the inside, normal part of the restaurant are still pretty slow and sluggish. And so it's going to be a tough time here yet until we get, more success, especially with the elevation we've had in the caseloads in Edmonton and Calgary in the recent days.
Well, if you can have outdoor dining in Whistler in the middle of winter, somehow in Calgary and Edmonton, they're going to figure it out.
Well, they do have those heaters, but I'm not sure in minus 30 degrees.
And the wind chill.
I'll let you come and experience that.
I don't know. I had 25 years of experiencing the prairies. I was born in Calgary, grew up in Peace River. So, yeah, I know what winter's all about, and that's why I laugh. But if there's ever a place that can innovate and find a way around it, I think Calgary would be the place.
Yeah, and you're seeing, between Sept and the University of Calgary and the company spending and the government spending and support, I think you're going to see breakthrough technologies, and I think that, the industry doesn't get enough credit for all the good they're doing to solve this problem longer term and to make their industry viable in a future cleaner tech world.
Hydrogen, how big is that going to be for Alberta?
Everybody, you hear a lot of talk about it and people saying it's going to be a big thing, but I think if you recall, Japan for the Tokyo Olympics just tried using buses with hydrogen, and somehow it didn't work, and they had to go to diesel ones. So the technology is still up for grabs. The distribution system for it is still up for grabs. It's a great idea for the long term, but execution is going to be critical, and technology is going to be critical. And there's a lot of different methodologies being used to make that a bigger play, but it's going to take some time. And from what we see right now, we're not there yet.
Bitcoin mining, is that the future for Alberta's natural gas?
We're seeing, there's been a lot of, Bitcoin activity in Alberta. I think the biggest place for Bitcoin right now is China, because they have a lot of coal-fired facilities that are giving them cheap rates. Wherever somebody gets the cheapest electricity rates is where they're going to go to do the Bitcoin mining. Alberta's cost of electricity is going up. I can tell you from our own bill that it is. Because they've shut down the coal-fired facilities, TransAlta, and moved to more natural gas, and natural gas prices are not $1 an MCF anymore. They're just under $4. So the cost of electricity in the province has risen, and I think that's going to make it tougher for the Bitcoin operators within the province.
And also you had those two operations that were shut down because they failed to get business permits or do environmental studies because the neighbors hated the sound of a turbojet warming up in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Not in my backyard is for every industry. And do you want a large solar farm behind you? Do you want the wind, the wind facilities? All of this is something that, is going to be, challenging going forward if we want to meet the goals that everybody's aspiring to.
Now, we can always do our own solar rooftops and maybe have a little windmill in the backyard and perhaps even generate extra electricity for the grid. Could that be a solution? Encourage homegrown power like that? However, I do know of a farmer in the Abbotsford area in British Columbia who had windmills and he put more power down the grid than he used, but Hydro still charged him for his own power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, solar, I see a lot of housing and some of the new subdivisions, they're putting solar panels on the roofs. To use it in established homes is going to be costly, but I think that is something that makes sense. But a windmill in backyards in an urban environment is a non-starter, in my opinion, with the NIMBY issue and getting the neighbors to agree to allowing it.
Joseph, how's the rig count doing in Canada?
Rig count is up significantly. That's one of the big things why we've seen a lot of drilling activity. Last week we did have a decline of 9 rigs to 147, but of that, that's up from 54 a year ago. Oil rig count was the one that came down 10 to 85 versus 19. Gas rigs 62 versus 35 a year ago. So the industry is spending more money. They have more cash flow. I expect we'll see more drilling activity pick up in the next few months to bring on production of natural gas for the high prices that you get in winter. And of course, you want your flush production to come on right when the prices are going to be near their peak, November, December, January. And so I think that the Canadian industry is improving. The service sector is getting more activity, but margins are not really great because the competitiveness is there, and the oil companies are being very sharp with their pencil. They're not wanting to give price increases over the cost of inputs, labor that goes through and steel that comes through. They know they have to pay those, but to increase the overall margin, the utilization rate in the industry is still so low that they have pricing. There's no pricing power by the drillers or the frackers at this point. But I think if we head into second half of 22 and we're in the high 70s, 80s, I think we'll start seeing the industry, start to pay more for services because the utilization rates will get up to levels that justify price increases.
Joseph, thank you so much for chatting with us.
My pleasure as always, Jim.
My guest has been Josef Schachter, founder of the Schachter Energy Report online at schachterenergyreport.ca. He was speaking to us from Calgary. If you have any questions for Joseph or any of our other guests, we'll ask that question for you if you send it to info@howestreet.com, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.